Hey everyone, it's William Moore. You are watching Beyond Belief. I pray that everyone's having a wonderful day today. Thank you for joining me for this fourth program on my new channel. Now, before we continue our discussion in Matthew chapter 24, I have a few housekeeping items to take care of. 1. Comprehending the text, Matthew 24, part 4 will be broken down into two parts. I have so much material to cover that I had to do this. Now, you'll have a part 4A and a part 4B. If you are watching part 4B right now, go back and watch part 4A first. If a program gets too long, I'm going to have issues uploading it to the channel because I'm on satellite internet. So I did not want to do that. Plus, I want to keep these to where they're at a friendly length. I think an hour, not going too much over an hour is a good length. Some people will watch these weekly. Some people have been watching these daily, and I thank you for that. Been getting a lot of great feedback, and I'm very excited about where this program is going to go. So, also, I want to address something. You'll see that I'm wearing a breathe right. I'll be sipping on tea and sipping on water. My allergies hit me this week with a vengeance. Now, I thought I was coming down with something. My throat was on fire. I was coughing, sneezing, had aches. My head felt like it was 100 pounds. And come to find out, I looked up the allergy index in the area. The indices for tree pollen were through the roof. So tree pollen in my area is really high right now. So that had an effect on me. And so I'm going to be drinking some water, going to be drinking some tea, and as you see, I'm wearing a breathe right. So I'm praying that this program, this part, goes as smoothly as the first three. And I think they went rather smooth. I'm pleased with how they turned out. But there might be a little bit more editing to this one. There might be some times where I have to stop and take a drink because I'm about to cough. Anyway, so bear with me on that. Also, I want to address something. I don't want to come off as being negative towards anyone, any individual, any group, especially in the Messianic movement, the Hebrew roots community, the Torah observant community. I have friends in those communities, a lot of fine people in those communities, even in the Christian community. A lot of fine people, people I like, people I get along with, people I love. And I know that over the course of the first three programs, it may have come off that I was angry towards the Messianic community or had negative feelings. Now, I don't have negative feelings toward the people as a whole. I have negative feelings towards those, and I'm angry with those who sow confusion. For example, I can log on to Facebook, social media, and there'll be a pattern. You'll see one topic being talked about. It will catch on and be talked about by, numerous people. Topics so trivial as facial hair, where arguments start. Topics so trivial as the shape of the earth. You have people who claim to know the Hebrew, who claim to be Hebraic, who are taking a Hebraic document, the Hebrew scriptures, and they're reading these documents and they're interpreting these documents with Western American eyes, not realizing that the Hebrew has idioms, metaphors, colloquialisms, that it is an expansive text, that it is poetic, and they will read this like they're reading a Greek abstract document, and they will try and interpret it as a Greek abstract document when it is a Hebrew document. It is concrete. It is not abstract. The Hebrew will say, Yahweh is my rock. Yahweh is my strong tower. Yahweh is my shield. The Greek mind will say, God is all powerful. God is everywhere. and you have this mindset interpreting a Hebraic document, people not paying attention to metaphors, not paying attention to idioms, not paying attention to colloquialisms, not paying attention to the expansiveness of the text or the poetry within the text, and spreading false doctrine. That leads me to something else that I have been, reminded of. And I am not mad at anyone out there that is watching this program, and I don't want it to come off that I am. However, there are people I am angry with. The John Hagees, the Michael Roods, the Hal Lindsays, the Tim LaHaye's. Now, none of those people are going to be watching this program, especially Tim LaHaye. He has taken a dirt nap. But I'm talking to people who have been lied to like I was lied to. So, if I seem angry at times, and I do not mean to, and I'm going to try and refrain from that, because I don't want to come off as an angry person. But if I seem angry, it's because I'm angry at the people who have lied to all of us. And that brings me to something else which was pointed out. Not only am I speaking to people who have been lied to, I'm speaking to people who are going through battles in their life. So I don't want to seem insensitive when I say, oh, so you lost your job, boo-hoo. That was not my intent. What I'm trying to do is make a distinction between the persecutions and trials that people today are going through compared to what people in the first century went through. Now, if you lose a job, that's a traumatic experience. If you're not able to frequent a place that you used to go to with friends, that can be disheartening. And we all need to fight for our freedoms. We don't need to lie down. However, if we do stand up for righteousness and we lose our job because of it, if we have belief in Yeshua Messiah, we're going to be okay. If we're all honest, we can admit we've lost jobs before. I've worked for 3 different companies that went belly up, and I found myself in a position where I was unemployed. What I did, I took those opportunities to better myself, to come out ahead, to come out in a better position than I was before I even got that job that I lost. And if you're a believer in Yeshua Messiah, you can do that. You still have life to be able to rebuild, to be able to build back better. Anyway, so I don't want to come off as insensitive if somebody loses a job. But it's not like what they went through in the first century, where they were beheaded, where they were hung on a stake, where they watched their family members, or maybe they themselves, were lit on fire as a Roman candle to light the Roman streets at night, or to watch their children be wrapped in wild animal skins and then cast to the dogs and be ripped asunder. The troubles in this present time do not even compare to what the people in the first century went through. And we're not taught that history. Why? Because there's an agenda. And we're going to get into that in a later series. There's an agenda to make you think that someone's coming to rescue you on a white horse, that you don't have to do anything. And that's part of the agenda, to make sure that you don't do anything, that you do not advance the kingdom of Messiah. So I don't want to come off like that at all, because I love everyone. I don't want you to feel that, I'm being insensitive to your plight if you have lost your job. Those things are heavy, but not as heavy as loss of life. You still have your life. You can still be an overcomer in any situation as long as you put your trust in Yeshua Messiah. Okay, one thing real quick. Somewhere that everyone's mind goes to when you're discussing prophecy, it doesn't matter if you're discussing Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, Yeshayahu, which is Isaiah, Yirmiyahu, which is Jeremiah, or the book of Daniel, any of the writings. You start talking about prophecy, and immediately everyone's mind wanders or goes to the book of Revelation, which is the most Hebraic and most prophetic text in all of Scripture. Whatever our interpretation of this message is, the message of Revelation, whatever that interpretation is today, the message must have made sense to the original audience of Yochanan's day. It would be cruel to give them words which were not applicable to them. Words meant for thousands of years after their persecutions were over. Revelation is a real letter addressed to real people who lived real lives and struggled to remain steadfast in their obedience to Yisrael's Eloheinu in a dark pagan world. The message of Revelation speaks to the core of their persecutions. We must understand it in this light first and foremost. Now, I've said that before, and I'm saying it again for a reason. Because we have to recognize audience and we have to recognize timestamps. Too many people have glossed over the audience of Revelation. And people like to say, well, it's talking about certain time stages within the history of the assembly. That's not how it worked, okay? 7 assemblies were addressed, all in Asia Minor at that time, and things that were pertinent to them specifically are being addressed by Messiah and Yochanan. So let's get out of this, ego to where we think it's all about us. Let's take ourselves out of the first row and let us put the original audience back in the first row. And then we are spectators of what is being said. And then we'll understand the text properly, without error. So, with that being said, I want to get into Matthew 24, Part 4a. And remember, there'll be a Part 4b. But let's also keep in mind, always, timestamps, the audience who's being addressed. And let's always remember that the Hebrew contains metaphors and is a completely different language. Even though it's been translated into English, it's a completely different language than what we're used to. We were trained in English. We were trained in abstract thought, Western mind. We need to lay that aside when we're reading Scripture. And we need to pray about it, and we need to read things over and over and over again. For as the lightning comes out of the east and shines even to the west, so also will the coming of the Son of Man. For wherever the carcass is, there the eagles will be gathered. And immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun shall be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from the heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. Matthew 24, 27 through 29. Now, I've got Hashemayim there. I like using Hashemayim. I'm going to try and just use the English terms for those who are tuning in, or those who will be watching this, who are not familiar with the Hebraic terminology. So I'm going to try and keep it completely English from here on out. The great tribulation upon the Yehudim people at Yehrushalayim in Yehuda during the year 67 to 70 CE was such as never had been before, nor would ever be again. Matthew 24:21. It was so horrible that if those days had gone much longer, no one would have survived. 24:22. In an old book from 1938 entitled The Pilgrim Soul by John Philip Shebali, translated from the Dutch to German and then to English, are these descriptive words about part of that great tribulation upon the Yehudim. Though corpses lay so thick in the street, the besieged had for some time thrown them over the walls in such numbers as filled the ditches to breed a pestilence in the Roman army. From the commencement of the siege, that is, for the last 3 months, out of only one gate were carried 115,880 corpses. That's exclusive of those thrown over the walls, of which every day saw a great number. That the troops on both sides, in their motions, trampled over dead bodies. as shocking circumstance to those who were not quite divested of humanity. Imagine that. Bodies so thick you're walking all over them. Possibly throwing friends' corpses over the wall just to create or breed pestilence in the Roman army's camp. Excuse me. Going to grab a drink. During that time, there arose false prophets and false messiah who promised victory to the Yehudim if only they would follow them. There would come those who claimed to be the Messiah, false messiahs. If it were publicized that the Messiah was in the desert or in the secret chambers underneath the temple at Yehrushalayim, the people were not to believe any such reports. Matthew 24:26. This was not the way that the true Messiah would make his appearance. His coming would not be localized. For as the lightning comes out of the east and shines even to the west, so also will the coming of the Son of Man. Matthew 24:27. The false messiahs were to be numerous, but their appearances during those days were to be disregarded. The people were to see something much greater in scope happening than some pseudo-messiahs doing some magic and promising deliverance to the people. The real Messiah would appear, and in a way unexpected. His presence would be likened to the lightning coming out of the east and shining to the west. Yeshua was using apocalyptic language in the style of the prophets in Tanakh. He is saying that his coming would not be a secret thing, but rather would be as noteworthy and climactic as lightning flashing in the sky. He would not be found somewhere like the desert or in secret chambers of the temple or some other physical place like that, not even on the Mount of Olives. The point is that the presence of Messiah will not be localized as with these false messiahs. His presence will cover all the known area. It will be universal from east to the west, and the expression probably could also refer to the suddenness and the swiftness of the event when it occurs. For as the lightning comes out of the east and shines even to the west, so also will be the coming of the Son of Man. For wherever the carcass is, there the eagles will be gathered. And immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun shall be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from the heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then all the tribes of the earth shall mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of the heaven with power and great esteem, or majesty. And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. Matthew 24:27-31. The preceding 5 verses, as well as other verses already looked at in this study, are the prediction of Yeshua concerning his coming and judgment on Israel in 67 through 70 CE. It is not a future event to us. It happened just 40 years after Yeshua made the prediction in that same generation, which he said, all these things would be fulfilled. Matthew 24:34. There's no double fulfillment. There's no double reference. There are no mixed up passages which change the time factor. There's no transition verse separating the destruction of Yehrushalayim from another event 2,000 years or so in the future. More error has been taught in eschatology based on the misunderstanding of this passage than possibly on any other passage in the Messianic writings. When Yeshua used the picture of lightning to represent his coming, it should remind one of Eloheinu's words concerning the punishment that came upon Assyria. Behold, the name of Yahweh comes from afar, burning with his anger, and uplifting of smoke. His lips are full of fury, and his tongue like a devouring fire. And Yahweh shall cause his majestic voice to be heard, and shall show the lightning down of his arm, with the indignation of his anger, and with the flame of a devouring fire, with scattering and tempest and hailstones. That's from Yeshayahu or Isaiah 30:27 and 30. We're also reminded of Zechariah 9 and 14. And Yahweh shall be seen over them, and his arrow shall go forth like the lightning. And Yahuwah Eloheinu shall blow the ram's horn, and shall go out with the windstorms of the south. Highly apocalyptic or symbolic language is used to describe Eloheinu's judgments against people. So is the description of the coming of the Son of Man in judgment upon Yisrael. For as the lightning comes out of the east and shines even to the west, so also will be the coming of the Son of Man. In this verse, Yeshua refers to himself as the Son of Man. Now, back in Daniel 7:13, the prophet said that he saw in a vision one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven. This referred to the Son of Man coming to the Ancient of Days to be given a kingdom over all peoples, Israel and Gentiles. Now here in Matthew 24, this same title is used concerning Messiah and his coming. And then in verse 30, the very same expression is used concerning the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven. Yeshua took this title to himself, and this is symbolic language which he was using. In Daniel, the coming of the Son of Man was to the Ancient of Days. In Matthew 24, the coming of the Son of Man is at the manifestation of that kingdom which he received. In between the time he received the kingdom and manifested it, Stephen, as he preached to the Yehudim high priest and the council, looked up into heaven and said, "Behold, I see the heavens opened and the Son of Man standing on the right hand of Eloheinu." Acts 7:56. This was the only time this title was applied to Messiah by any of his disciples or Talmudim. No wonder that the Yehudim persecutors cast Stephen out of the city and stoned him until he died. They recognized that in the use of that title, Son of Man, Stephen was acclaiming Yeshua to be the Messiah who was promised in the Tanakh to receive the kingdom. But now in this passage in Matthew 24, we come to the time when Yeshua is to manifest the power of the kingdom, and his coming is portrayed in apocalyptic language, in an apocalyptic way, symbolically. As Eloheinu came down to bring judgment on the Egyptians many years ago, and I am come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, that's in Shemoth, Exodus 3 and 8, so Messiah came to bring judgment on those to whom the early believers had been in bondage to. The word coming is found in Matthew 24:30, they shall see the Son of Man coming, and Matthew 24:48, my master delays his coming, is from the Greek word erchomē, and is the verb form. It refers to the same thing. We have earlier seen that the word parousia, the Greek word in noun form for the coming in this passage, means arrival and presence, though not usually both meanings in the same instance. The word involves an event, and it involves an idea of duration, but not usually in the same instance. Concerning a person, it means that the person has arrived. It can also mean that the person is now here with us. I will never leave you or forsake you. I will not leave you comfortless. I will come to you. Those were not physical manifestations. However, the word parousia does not necessarily signify a bodily physical presence, especially here in Matthew 24. So Yeshua is here definitely speaking of his coming as the manifestation of himself as the Messiah. Let us keep in mind that he is still answering the disciples' question, when shall these things be? What shall be the sign of your coming and of the end of the world? Matthew 24:3. These things referred, of course, to the destruction of the temple in particular. It was involved in their questions. And in their minds, the sign of his coming and the end of the world or age. They would all be connected. They were right about this, and Yeshua did not correct them. In just a moment, he's going to tell them that immediately after the tribulation of those days, which he had been telling them about, there would be the coming of the Son of Man. That coming would be described in such symbolic language as had been used in the Tanakh to describe those events of when Eloheinu came in judgment on nations and manifested his presence in that way. Only this time it would be Eloheinu manifested through Messiah, for all judgment had now been given over to the Son. Yochanan or John 5:22. Okay, so, excuse me. These things referred, of course, to the destruction of the temple in particular, and in their minds the sign of his coming and the end of the age would all be connected. So, he's answering their question. The end of the age, the end of what? The temple, because it was the end of the temple age. And the sign of his coming, his presence, the sign that he was who he said he was. Now, we're talking here, they did not even know that Messiah yet was going to die and then be resurrected. So how would they know of a second coming anyway? They're not using this word coming in that sense. They're saying, how will we know that you are who you say you are? How will we know? What is the sign of your presence? What is the sign of you being Messiah, who you say you are? Matthew is the only gospel writer who uses the word parousia, coming, so it is unique to him. So it is evident that at least Matthew connected the parousia with the other events mentioned, i.e. the destruction of the temple and the end of the age. Also interesting is the fact that only Matthew of the gospel writers used the expression end of the age. We understand better about this when we realize, as many scholars agree, that Matthew was writing primarily to Yehudim people. The expression end of the world or age would certainly convey to them the idea of the end of their age, which to them would end with the coming of the Messiah. We need to see these words through their eyes. The parousia, the arrival and our presence of the Messiah, would occur at the end of that age, the Hekal or the temple age. It has been very difficult for some to believe that the coming of the Son of Man here mentioned can be anything else but a future coming of the Son of Eloheinu from heaven to earth in a physical, bodily, personal appearance. But let us remember that great spiritual events occurring in this dispensation of the fullness of times on numerous occasions has been called comings of Messiah. His first appearing in the flesh, Hebrews 9:26, his presence on the Mount of Transfiguration, 2 Kepha, or Peter 1:16, his ascension, Daniel 7:13, the coming of the Ruach HaKodesh, or the set-apart spirit, Yochanan 14:18, and the judgment on Israel in 70 CE, Matthew 24, are all designated as comings of Messiah. When Caiaphas, the high priest, asked Yeshua if he were Messiah, the son of Eloheinu, Yeshua said unto him, You have said. Nevertheless, I say unto you, hereafter shall you see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of heaven. Matthew 26:64. Yeshua was saying, from now on, you're going to see my authority manifested and my claim vindicated. And they did see it. They saw it in earthquakes at his death. They saw it in the blackness at midday when he was dying. Pliny, the historian, living in Egypt at the time, said, either today the world is coming to an end, or else God is dying. They saw it in the resurrection of the bodies in the cemetery which came to life and entered into the city. They saw it on the day of Shavuot or Pentecost. They saw it in the destruction of Yehrushalayim and the Hekal, the temple, in 67 and 70 CE, or through 70 CE. They saw his authority and kingdom. They saw his presence in all these things. In symbolic language, it was said that he would be sitting at the place of authority and coming in the clouds of Shemayim or heaven. This was apocalyptic language that the Yehudim leaders well understood. So, when Caiaphas asked, "Are you Messiah, son of Eloheinu?" Yeshua says to him, "You have said, nevertheless I say unto you, hereafter shall you see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of heaven." He told him that he would see this. He told those in the audience that they would see this, that they would witness this, and they did witness it. They saw it in the earthquake at his death. They saw it at the blackness at midday when he was dying. They saw it in the resurrection of bodies in the cemetery which came to life and entered the city. They saw it on Shavuot. They saw it. They saw his authority. It has been said Yeshua did not come as mentioned in Matthew 24:27 through 30, so we know that the scripture was not fulfilled in 70 CE, and therefore has to be in our future. In the mind of one who makes this statement, there is a preconceived notion of what the coming of Messiah in that chapter has to be. Their only notion of a coming of Messiah beyond the first coming is in our future, in spite of the fact that Eloheinu, excuse me, in spite of the fact that Eloheinu is depicted as coming down from Shemayim or heaven again and again in the Tanakh, but not in bodily and physical form which could be seen by mortal eyes. Why cannot we accept the fact that Yeshua here in Matthew 24 used highly symbolic language, the same as had been used elsewhere in Scripture, to portray this great event of his coming in judgment on Israel and manifesting his own majesty and kingdom through the events that took place? I mean, why can we not accept the fact that Yeshua is using the same symbolic language that had been used in the Tanakh to portray the great event of his coming in judgment? I mean, people have preconceived notions of this coming of Messiah, and we need to realize that there's been many comings of Messiah. There's been many comings of Eloheinu throughout history. For wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together. Matthew 24:28. Luke puts this statement right after the section where Messiah likened his coming to the destruction of the world in Noah's day and the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah in Lot's day. And after he had said to the Talmudim, or his disciples, that one would be taken and another left, wheresoever the body is, thither will the eagles be gathered together. Luke 17:37. Here we have the saying connected with the coming of the Son of Man. As lightning comes out of the east and shines to the west, as birds of prey flying up in the sky are waiting for some carcass to light upon, so the coming of the Son of Man will be to that area where the carcass will be found. The Yehudim nation, and more specifically the city of Yehrushalayim, was the carcass which the Roman eagles descended upon to devour. The Persian and Syriac versions translate the word for eagles as vultures. Eloheinu used the same kind of language in the Tanakh when referring to the Chaldeans coming against Israel. For lo, I raise up the Chaldeans. Their horsemen shall come from far. They shall fly as the eagle that hastens to eat. And that's in Habakkuk 1:6-8. In Yeshayahu or Isaiah 46:10-11, the reference was made to Cyrus as being a bird of prey. I will do all my pleasure, calling a ravenous bird from the east, the man that executes my counsel from a far country. And we're going to get into it, but a lot of people say, oh man, as in Noah's day. Well, that just means it came upon them suddenly. It doesn't mean that there's something going on with genetics. It doesn't mean that there's something going on, with lizard people or Nephilim. It means that just as in Noah's day, it was quick, and in the days of Lot, it was quick, that judgment came upon them quickly, so will it be in this day. It is more than likely that Yeshua had in mind some of these passages from the Tanakh, which have a metaphorical style that he drew from in his teachings. He may have thought of Yirmiyahu 7:33 and 34, and the carcass of this people shall be meat for the fowls of the heaven and for the beast of the earth, for the land shall be desolate. Excuse me. The whole system of the Yehudim and the lives of the people were deteriorating into a rotten mess, and it was only inevitable that sooner than later the result would be the judgment of Eloheinu upon it all. Yeshua clearly saw this and predicted it, and it happened as the Roman army swooped down upon the land, then Yehrushalayim itself, as vultures looking for a dead carcass to pounce upon. Divine principles were at work. Possibly Yeshua also had in mind Hosea 8 and 1 when he made his statement about the eagles and the carcass. Hosea recorded, "Set the trumpet to your mouth. He shall come as an eagle against the house of Yahweh, because they have transgressed my covenant and trespassed against my Torah." It is a well-known fact of history that the Roman army standards had the ensign of an eagle upon them. In Zechariah 14 and 2, Eloheinu said he would gather all nations against Yehrushalayim to battle, and this is certainly what he did in the area of time we are discussing here. The Roman army was gathered from all nations, and Eloheinu used the Roman armies to punish Israel, even as he had used the Assyrians many years prior to do the same. The Assyrian was the rod of my anger, and the staff in their hand is my indignation. Yeshayahu, Isaiah 10:5. Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. Note several things here. First, Yeshua is talking about the tribulation of those days, that is, on the very days he was addressing the questions brought up by his Talmudim, the very days the Yehudim would be experiencing this terrible tribulation from 67 through 70 CE. Those days definitely determines the time which is under discussion, which means, of course, that he is not talking about some tribulation during a later course of events in the world, nor a tribulation which is to take place either 3.5 years or 7 years, either prior to or subsequent to the rapture of Christians at a future coming of Messiah. This is not some future event to us as dwelt upon so much by the dispensationalists and futurists. It was the tribulation of those days which was mentioned here, the days he had already discussed. The days he was answering the Talmudim's questions concerning. Those days. Second, what he was talking about was to happen immediately after the tribulation of those days. The word immediately is from the Greek word eutheos, which means at once or soon as, forthwith, shortly, straightway. It certainly would not portray a time frame of 2,000 years or so later. The whole problem in this matter has been in wanting to equate the coming of the Son of Man with something out in our own future, instead of understanding that Yeshua was talking about his revealed presence and the judgments that came on Israel back in 70 CE. And as stated, the disciples had no idea that there would be a second coming. They were asking what his presence would be. How do we know you are who you say you are? What is the mark of you being Messiah? I mean, they had no idea. Peter came to him when he said that he would, die and rise 3 days later, and tried to say, Master, let it not be. So they had no idea that he was going to die and be resurrected and then go ascend up into Shemayim, or heaven, at that time. Which they would have to know in order to be asking something about a second coming. So, and immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun shall be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from the heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. There can be no question about the tribulation of verse 29 being the same great tribulation to which Yeshua was referred in. I'm sorry, let me read that again. There can be no question about the tribulation of verse 29 being the same great tribulation to which Yeshua referred in verse 21. In verse 21 he said, "For then shall be great tribulation." It was then, not later. That great tribulation occurred in connection with the siege and destruction of Yehrushalayim and the temple, as Yeshua plainly said would take place. Therefore, the tribulation of verse 29 cannot refer to some other tribulation supposedly to occur many hundreds of years later. It all occurred in 67 through 70 CE, and what Yeshua said was to happen next immediately had to have happened at that time, or the words of Yeshua could be called into question. So it's the same tribulation in verse 29 and verse 21. It's not talking about some other tribulation supposedly that could occur, hundreds of years or even 2,000 years later. It all occurred in 67 through 70 CE. And what Yeshua said was to happen next, immediately, had to have happened at that time, or the words of Yeshua cannot be called into question. No transition verse. Third, Yeshua said that immediately after the tribulation of those days, there would be tremendous celestial happenings. This is in connection with that great tribulation of 67 through 70 CE. But immediately following it, and this word immediately indicates to us that he could not be talking about some far-off distant event some 2,000 years or so away. These celestial things happened at the closing of the Great Tribulation period of years ago. The sun and the moon were darkened. The stars fell from Shemayim, or heaven, and the powers of the heavens were shaken. It is this kind of language which Yeshua used, to which we shall now give our attention. And we're going to give that attention in Comprehending the Text, Part 4b. And I am so glad that I made it through this. This is now my 6th take. So I'll let you in on that at the end of this. This is my 6th take on this today. I'm wanting to get these out for you all because of the amount of positive feedback. Plus, I'm waiting till I get 5 episodes done or programs done before I start promoting and advertising the channel. So I wanted to get this out there, and I'm so thankful to Yahuwah that I was able to do it this time and get this done without any coughing, without much sneezing. We had one sneeze in there. Like I said, I'm just thankful. I could almost cry right now because it's been a very rough day trying to get this done. Plus, there's been some interruptions outside of this with deliveries and some things we have going on here at the house as far as construction that were interrupting this also. But mainly the allergies, the cold, the sneezing, or not the cold, but the sneezing and the coughing and such, and the scratchy throat. So I am so thankful that we have come to the end of part 4, part A of part 4. And I'm looking forward to getting this out to you all, and then looking forward to getting Comprehending the Text, Matthew 24, Part 4b out to you as soon as possible. So until next time, everyone, thanks for hanging in there. Shalom ve-barakah, which means peace and blessings. This is William Moore, Far Beyond Belief.